The words hit me like a slap across the face in that crowded restaurant. "Mama, find another table. We're celebrating DeAndre's promotion, and honestly, we don't need you sitting here looking all pitiful and ruining our vibe." My adopted daughter Shanice said this, the same child I took in at age 7 when her mother, my cousin, passed away. The same girl I raised as my own, put through college, and helped buy her first car. She stood there in her expensive designer dress that I'd helped pay for, looking at me like I was a stranger begging for change. I was 72 years old, standing in the middle of Arnaud's soul food kitchen on a Friday evening, holding my purse with shaking hands. My son DeAndre wouldn't even look at me. My biological daughter Tamika just scrolled through her phone like I wasn't even there. The entire restaurant went quiet. Every eye was on me. That's when I heard it, a voice I never expected to hear in that moment. "Oh, Dolores will be sitting at this table. But you three, you need to find somewhere else to be." I turned around so fast I almost lost my balance. Standing in the doorway, leaning on a cane but standing tall and strong, was Loretta Mae Jenkins. My best friend since we were 16 years old. The woman who was supposed to be in hospice care dying from stage 4 cancer. The woman I'd visited just yesterday, barely able to whisper. But here she was, dressed in a beautiful purple suit, her wig laid to perfection, looking like she'd walked straight out of Sunday service, ready to testify. The shock on my children's faces was worth every tear I'd cried that week. Before we continue, please comment below, as I'd love to hear your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel to help us hit that big 1,000 subscriber milestone. Let me take you back to the beginning, so you understand how I ended up in that restaurant, humiliated by my own children. My name is Dolores Washington, but everyone calls me Dee. I worked as a nurse for 43 years at Memphis General Hospital. I raised 3 children mostly on my own after my husband Raymond passed away from a heart attack when he was only 49. That was 23 years ago, and I never remarried. I poured everything I had into those kids. DeAndre was my oldest at 42. He worked in sales for some tech company, always bragging about his big commissions. Tamika was 37, a middle school teacher who complained about her salary every chance she got. And Shanice, my adopted daughter, was 38, working as a real estate agent. All 3 of them were married. All 3 had children. And all 3 treated me like a personal bank. It started small after Raymond died. DeAndre needed help with his mortgage payment. "Just this once, Mama." Tamika's car broke down and she needed a new transmission. "I got you, baby." Shanice wanted to take a real estate class. "Mama, this is an investment in my future." I said yes every time. I couldn't help it. They were my babies. But just this once turned into every month. Then every week. Then whenever they wanted something, they'd call me up with some emergency. My grandson Aiden needed braces. My granddaughter Zara wanted to go on a school trip to Washington, D.C. My grandson Caleb needed a laptop for college. I gave and gave and gave until my savings account started looking thin. But I kept working extra shifts, kept saying yes, because that's what mothers do, right? The disrespect started creeping in slowly. At first, it was little things. DeAndre would call me at midnight demanding money for some emergency that couldn't wait until morning. Tamika would show up at my house unannounced, go through my mail, and ask why I was wasting money on myself when she needed help with her kids' school supplies. Shanice started calling me Dee instead of Mama, like I was just some random lady on the street. Then it got worse. They stopped inviting me to family events. I'd see pictures on Facebook of birthday parties, graduation celebrations, holidays at someone's house, my own grandchildren's parties, and I wasn't there. When I asked why, Shanice said, "Mama, you're always so tired and complaining. We didn't want to burden you." Burden me? I'd raised these children. I'd been there for every scraped knee, every heartbreak, every triumph. And now I was a burden? But I still sent money when they called. 2 months ago, everything changed. My best friend Loretta called me over to her house. We'd been friends for 56 years. We grew up in the same neighborhood in South Memphis, went to Booker T. Washington High School together, stood up in each other's weddings, raised our kids together. We were more like sisters than friends. Loretta had been fighting cancer for 3 years. She'd beaten it once, but it came back meaner the second time. The doctors gave her 3 months, maybe 6 if she was lucky. When I got to her house that day, she was sitting in her favorite armchair, the one by the window that caught the afternoon sun. She looked so small, so frail, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. "Dee, sit down," she said. "We need to talk about something important." I sat on the couch across from her, my heart already breaking. I knew this was about the end, about funeral arrangements and saying goodbye. But Loretta surprised me. She always did. "I've been watching what your kids are doing to you," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "And I'm tired of keeping my mouth shut about it." I opened my mouth to defend them, like I always did, but she held up her hand. "Hush now. Let me finish. Those children of yours are bleeding you dry, Dee. And you're letting them do it because you think that's what love looks like. But baby, that ain't love. That's abuse." The word hit me hard. Abuse. I'd never thought of it that way. "I've made some decisions about my estate," Loretta continued, "and I want you to know about them before I'm gone." I didn't understand what she meant. Loretta and her husband Bernard had done well for themselves. He'd started a construction company back in the 70s that grew into one of the biggest black-owned businesses in Tennessee. When he passed away 10 years ago, he left Loretta comfortable. But I didn't know how comfortable until that day. "Bernard and I never had children," she said. "You know that. And my sisters and brothers, well, they showed their true colors after Bernard died, came around with their hands out, wanting this and that, just like your kids are doing to you now." She paused to catch her breath. The cancer was making it hard for her to talk for long periods. "I'm leaving you everything, Dee, every last penny, but there's a condition." My heart started pounding. "Loretta, what are you talking about?" "Bernard's company sold 3 years ago. Tech company bought it for $5.2 billion. That's billion with a B, D. We kept it quiet. Didn't want folks coming out of the woodwork. I've been living off the interest, making donations to churches and charities. But the bulk of it? That's going to you." I couldn't breathe. $5 billion? That couldn't be real. "But here's the condition," Loretta said, leaning forward. "You have to cut those children of yours off completely. Every last one of them. No more money. No more bailing them out. No more being their personal ATM machine. If you give them $1 single after I die, the entire inheritance goes to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. You understand me?" I sat there, stunned. "Loretta, I can't just abandon my children." "I'm not asking you to abandon them, baby. I'm asking you to free yourself. And maybe, just maybe, teach them what it means to stand on their own 2 feet. Besides, I've seen the way they treat you. I was at that restaurant last month when Shanice yelled at you for ordering the chicken instead of the fish because she thought you were being cheap and embarrassing. Remember that?" I remembered. I'd cried the whole drive home. "This is my dying wish, Dee. Promise me you'll do it. Promise me you'll finally put yourself first." I wanted to argue. I wanted to say no. But looking into my dying best friend's eyes, I couldn't refuse her. Not when she'd never asked me for anything in all these years. "I promise," I whispered. Loretta smiled. "Good. My lawyer, Mr. Theodore Reeves, will handle everything. He's one of the best attorneys in the South. He'll make sure those kids of yours can't contest anything. The will is ironclad." 2 weeks later, Loretta took a turn for the worse. I spent every day at her bedside in hospice, holding her hand, reading her favorite psalms, playing gospel music. Her sisters showed up demanding to know about the will. I told them I didn't know anything. Last Tuesday, 3 days ago, Loretta passed away peacefully in her sleep. I was there. I held her hand and sang, "His eye is on the sparrow," while she took her last breath. My heart shattered into a million pieces. The funeral was Friday morning. It was beautiful. Greater Hope Baptist Church was packed with people whose lives Loretta had touched. The choir sang. Pastor Williams preached a sermon that made everybody cry and shout at the same time. Loretta would have loved it. My children came to the funeral, not to support me in my grief, but because they wanted to be seen. DeAndre brought his wife, Valencia, who wore a dress so tight and bright red it was disrespectful. Tamika brought her husband, Jerome, who spent the whole service on his phone. Shanice came with her husband, Marcus, and they left right after the service without even speaking to me. But they all called me that evening, all three of them, within an hour of each other. DeAndre needed $15,000 for a business opportunity. Tamika needed $10,000 for her daughter's cheerleading competition fees and travel expenses. Shanice needed $20,000 to flip a property and promised she'd pay me back double. I was exhausted. I was grieving. I was done. "No," I said to each of them. "I can't help you this time." The reactions were explosive. DeAndre cussed me out, said I was selfish and clearly didn't love my own grandchildren. Tamika cried and said I was abandoning her in her time of need. Shanice laughed like I'd told a joke and said, "Stop playing, Mama. Just send the money. You always do." When I insisted I meant it, they all hung up on me. The next morning, Saturday, DeAndre called and said they wanted to take me out to dinner to celebrate his recent promotion at work. They'd all be there with their families, a nice family meal at Arnaud's Soul Food Kitchen, my favorite restaurant. I should have known something was wrong. They never invited me anywhere. But I was lonely and grieving, and I wanted to believe my children actually wanted to spend time with me. So I said yes. I got dressed in my Sunday best, did my hair, put on my nice jewelry, drove myself to the restaurant, walked in with a smile on my face, ready to enjoy an evening with my family. That's when I saw them, all three of my children, their spouses, and my grandchildren, sitting at a long table in the back, laughing, drinking, having a good time. I walked over, my heart full of hope. "Hey, family," I said. "Sorry I'm a little late. Traffic was—" "Mama, what are you doing here?" DeAndre interrupted, looking confused. You invited me to dinner," I said, that hope starting to crack. Shanice rolled her eyes. "We didn't invite you, Mama. DeAndre just mentioned he was getting a promotion, and we decided to celebrate, as a family." "But I'm your mother," I said quietly. "And you're broke," Tamika added, not even looking up from her menu. "You told us you can't help us anymore, remember? So why would we invite you to an expensive dinner when you can't even contribute?" The words hung in the air like smoke. I felt my face get hot. Other diners were starting to look at us. I just thought... I couldn't finish the sentence. That's when Shanice stood up and said those words. Those awful, cruel words. "Mama, find another table. We're celebrating DeAndre's promotion, and honestly, we don't need you sitting here looking all pitiful and ruining our vibe." I stood there frozen, my purse clutched in my trembling hands, my heart breaking in real time. And that's when Loretta walked in. Except it wasn't possible. Loretta was dead. I'd watched her die. I'd gone to her funeral just yesterday, but there she was, or someone who looked exactly like her. The woman walked straight up to our table, moving with purpose despite the cane. She was flanked by two people I didn't recognize, a tall black man in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase, and a younger black woman with a tablet. "Mrs. Dolores Washington?" the woman who looked like Loretta said, and that's when I realized it wasn't her. The voice was different, younger. Yes?" I stammered. "My name is Attorney Theodore Reeves," the man said, stepping forward, "and this is Ms. Patricia Jenkins, Mrs. Loretta Mae Jenkins' niece. We've been looking for you." Shanice sat back down, suddenly interested. DeAndre straightened in his chair. Tamika put her phone away. They all sensed something was happening. "What's this about?" I asked, still confused. "The reading of Mrs. Jenkins' will was this afternoon," Mr. Reeves said. "You weren't there because you weren't aware of the time. That's our fault. But the contents of the will are significant, and we need to discuss them with you immediately." "Can't this wait?" Shanice interjected. "We're trying to have a family dinner here." Mr. Reeves turned to look at her, and his expression was colder than winter. "I'm sorry, who are you?" "I'm her daughter," Shanice said, standing up like she was somebody important. "Ah, yes, one of the 3 children Mrs. Jenkins specifically mentioned in her will." He turned back to me. "Mrs. Washington, is there somewhere private we can talk?" My children were now standing, gathering around us. They smelled money. I could see it in their eyes. The same look they always got when they wanted something from me. "Whatever you need to say to our mama, you can say in front of us," DeAndre said, his chest puffed out. "We're her family." Mr. Reeves smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "Very well. Mrs. Washington, I'm pleased to inform you that you are the sole beneficiary of Mrs. Loretta Mae Jenkins's estate, the total value of which is approximately $5.2 billion. The restaurant went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. My children's faces went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, and then greed. Pure, undisguised greed. $5 billion? Tamika whispered. "With a B," Mr. Reeves confirmed. "However, there are conditions to this inheritance. Very specific conditions that Mrs. Jenkins insisted upon." That's when Patricia Jenkins spoke up. "My aunt was very clear in her wishes. Mrs. Washington receives the full inheritance only if she cuts off all financial support to her children. Effective immediately. Forever." The words hit like thunder. "What?" DeAndre shouted. "That's ridiculous. You can't do that." "Mrs. Jenkins can and did do exactly that," Mr. Reeves said calmly. "The will has been reviewed by 3 separate law firms. It's ironclad. Any attempt to contest it will result in legal action. And Mrs. Washington, if you give these 3 individuals even $1, the entire inheritance will be forfeited to charity." Shanice's face turned red with rage. "Mama, you can't actually be considering this. We're your children." I stood there, looking at my 3 children. The children I'd sacrificed everything for. The children who'd just told me to find another table because I was too broke to sit with them. And for the first time in my life, I saw them clearly. Really clearly. Mr. Reeves pulled an envelope from his briefcase and handed it to me. "This is from Mrs. Jenkins. She wanted you to have it after you learned about the inheritance." My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside was a letter in Loretta's handwriting. "Dearest Dee, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you know about the money. I know this is overwhelming. I know your children are probably losing their minds right now. Good. Let them. You've spent your whole life giving. Now it's time to receive. Take this money and live, baby. Travel. Rest. Spoil yourself. Find joy again. You've earned it. And if those children of yours start showing you respect, real respect, not the fake kind that comes from wanting something, then maybe you can have a relationship with them again. But not before. You deserve better than what they've been giving you. I love you, sister. Now go live your life. Forever your friend." Loretta tears streamed down my face as I read those words. "Mrs. Washington," Mr. Reeves said gently, "we need your answer. Do you accept the terms of Mrs. Jenkins's will?" I looked at my children one more time, at DeAndre, who was already pulling out his phone, probably calling his lawyer, at Tamika, who had tears in her eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were real or calculated, at Shanice, who looked at me with such fury I barely recognized her. Then I looked at Mr. Reeves and Patricia Jenkins, these strangers who were showing me more respect in this moment than my own children had shown me in years. I thought about Loretta's words, about living, about joy, about deserving better, and I made my choice. "Yes," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. I accept. The explosion that followed was instantaneous and terrifying. All three of my children started yelling at once. Shanice threw her napkin at me. DeAndre called me a traitor. Tamika sobbed that I was killing my own grandchildren. But Mr. Reeves and Patricia Jenkins moved to stand on either side of me, forming a protective barrier. The restaurant manager came over, concerned about the disturbance. "We're leaving," Mr. Reeves announced. "Mrs. Washington, we have a car waiting outside." As we walked toward the door, my children followed, still screaming. Other diners pulled out their phones, recording the scene. My grandchildren looked confused and scared. For a moment, guilt washed over me. What was I doing? These were my babies, my family. But then I remembered Shanice's words. "Find another table." And I kept walking. Outside, a black Mercedes was waiting. Mr. Reeves opened the door for me, and I slid into the leather seat. As we pulled away from the restaurant, I looked back. My 3 children stood on the sidewalk, their faces twisted with anger and disbelief. Their spouses looked shell-shocked. My grandchildren were crying, and I felt nothing. No guilt, no sadness. Just a strange sense of freedom I hadn't felt in decades. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Somewhere safe," Patricia Jenkins said from the front seat. "We have a lot to discuss, and, Mrs. Washington, I think you're going to need protection for the next few weeks. Your children are going to come after you with everything they have." She wasn't wrong. As we drove through Memphis, my phone started blowing up with calls and texts. I looked at the screen. DeAndre, Tamika, Shanice, their spouses, even some of my grandchildren's numbers. All of them wanting to talk. All of them wanting something. Mr. Reeves glanced at my phone. "I'd recommend turning that off for now, at least until we get you somewhere secure and can brief you on everything." I powered off my phone, and the sudden silence was deafening. "Mrs. Washington," Patricia said, turning to look at me, "my aunt talked about you constantly. She loved you like a sister. And she was furious about how your children treated you. This inheritance, these conditions. This was her way of giving you your life back. I hope you'll accept it as the gift she meant it to be." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. As we drove into the Memphis night, away from the restaurant, away from my children's anger, away from the life I'd known for 7 decades, I realized something. This wasn't an ending. This was a beginning. And my children, the ones who'd treated me like an ATM, like a burden, like someone who wasn't worth a seat at their table. They were about to learn what it meant to lose the one person who'd always been there for them. But the real question was, would they learn respect and love? Or would their greed destroy them completely? I was about to find out. And honestly, sitting in that Mercedes, watching the city lights blur past, I wasn't sure I cared which way it went anymore. I was finally free, and that scared me more than anything that had happened tonight. The safe house Mr. Reeves took me to was actually a luxury penthouse suite at the Peabody Hotel downtown. When we walked in, I almost laughed. Here I was, a 72-year-old nurse who'd spent her whole life clipping coupons and working double shifts, standing in a suite that probably cost more per night than my monthly mortgage. "This is temporary," Mr. Reeves explained as he set his briefcase on the marble counter, "until we can secure you a permanent residence and get your security detail in place." "Security detail?" I repeated, sinking into a chair that felt like sitting on a cloud. Patricia poured me a glass of water from the minibar. "Mrs. Washington, you're now one of the wealthiest black women in America. You need protection. Not just from strangers, but from people who'll claim to know you, to love you, to deserve a piece of what you have." She didn't have to say, "your children." We all knew who she meant. Over the next 3 hours, Mr. Reeves walked me through everything. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, properties Loretta owned that I never knew about, charitable foundations, business holdings. My head spun with numbers and legal terms I didn't understand. "The beauty of Mrs. Jenkins' planning," Mr. Reeves said, "is that she structured everything so you'd have immediate access to funds while the bulk of the estate goes through probate. You currently have $20 million in liquid assets you can access tomorrow morning." $20 million. Tomorrow morning. I started laughing, and once I started, I couldn't stop. Patricia looked concerned until she realized I wasn't hysterical, just overwhelmed. "I'm sorry," I said, wiping my eyes. "It's just, yesterday I was worried about making my light bill." "Not anymore," Mr. Reeves said with a small smile. "Now we need to discuss your children. They're going to fight this. I guarantee it." He was right. When I finally turned my phone back on the next morning, I had over 300 missed calls and texts. I scrolled through them, watching the messages evolve from confusion to anger to desperate pleading. DeAndre's text started with, "Mama, we need to talk about this misunderstanding." 2 hours later, "You're really going to choose money over your own son?" By midnight, "You're dead to me. Hope that money keeps you warm at night." Tamika's messages were manipulation wrapped in tears. "Mama, the kids are crying. They don't understand why Grammy doesn't love them anymore. How do I explain that you picked money over your grandchildren?" But Shanice's messages were pure venom. "You're a selfish witch. That money should be ours. Loretta was probably senile when she wrote that will. We're going to fight this and we're going to win. Enjoy it while it lasts." I showed the messages to Mr. Reeves when he arrived that morning with coffee and breakfast from a restaurant I couldn't pronounce. He read them carefully, his jaw tightening. "Perfect. Keep every single message. They're building our case for us." "What case?" I asked. "The restraining orders we're going to file this afternoon." Within a week, my children hired a lawyer. His name was Brett Cunningham, and according to Mr. Reeves, he was known for taking cases he couldn't win if the retainer was big enough. My children had pooled their money to hire him, which meant they were already spending money they didn't have, betting on money they thought they deserved. The legal battle began in earnest. They contested the will, claiming Loretta was mentally incompetent when she wrote it. Mr. Reeves destroyed that argument with medical records, video depositions, and testimony from 3 psychiatrists who'd evaluated Loretta specifically for this purpose. She'd thought of everything. They claimed undue influence, saying I'd manipulated a dying woman. But Loretta's niece, Patricia, testified about the decades of friendship, the conversations she'd witnessed, the deliberate planning that had started years before Loretta got sick. They even tried to claim the will violated some obscure Tennessee inheritance law. The judge threw that out in less than 5 minutes. Every legal strategy failed, but they kept trying, kept filing motions, kept dragging me back to court. And every time, Mr. Reeves was there, calm and professional, dismantling their arguments like he was solving a simple puzzle. The court battles were exhausting, but something else was happening that I didn't expect. My church family rallied around me. Greater Hope Baptist Church, where I'd been a member for 40 years, became my sanctuary in more ways than one. Pastor Williams called me personally after the news broke about the inheritance. I expected judgment, maybe a sermon about money being the root of all evil. Instead, he said, "Sister Dolores, the love of money is the root of evil, not money itself. And from what I hear, you've been rooted in love your whole life. It's about time love rooted itself back in you." The following Sunday, I went to church for the first time since everything happened. I was nervous, expecting whispers and stares. And there were some. But when I walked in, Mother Ernestine Johnson, an 85-year-old church mother who'd known me since I was a teenager, grabbed my hand. "Hold your head up, baby," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "You ain't got nothing to be ashamed of. Those children of yours ought to be ashamed treating their mama like that. But you walk in here like the queen you are." During testimony service, Sister Brenda Williams stood up. She was a social worker, someone I'd known casually for years. "I want to testify about something the Lord put on my heart," she said. "We all know about Sister Dolores' situation." And I want to say this publicly because it needs to be said. What her children did to her is called financial elder abuse. It's a crime. And too many of us in the Black community let it slide because we think family is everything. But family that abuses you isn't family. That's just people who share your blood. The church erupted in amens and applause. After service, women I barely knew came up to hug me, to share their own stories of ungrateful children, of being used and discarded. Men shook their heads and apologized on behalf of the younger generation. The church mothers formed a protective circle around me that no amount of money could buy. But it was Mother Ernestine who pulled me aside and said something that changed everything. "Those grandbabies of yours," she said. "They're suffering too, you know, caught in the middle of their parents' greed." She was right. I'd been so focused on my children's betrayal that I hadn't thought about my grandchildren. Aiden, Zara, Caleb, and the others. What were they going through? That night, I asked Mr. Reeves a question I should have asked weeks ago. Is there any way to help my grandchildren without violating the will? He smiled, like he'd been waiting for me to ask. Actually, yes. The will prohibits financial support to your 3 children. It says nothing about grandchildren. You could set up educational trusts, pay for their college, help them in ways that don't go through their parents. Then let's do it, I said. All of them. Every grandchild. Full ride to college, no strings attached. Mr. Reeves nodded. I'll have the documents drawn up. But I wasn't done. And I want to set up a foundation for seniors who are being financially abused by their families. I want to help other people get free like Loretta freed me. Patricia, who'd become a regular presence in my life, reached over and squeezed my hand. Aunt Loretta would love that. 3 months after that night at the restaurant, we were back in court for what Mr. Reeves promised would be the final hearing. My children had filed one last motion, this time claiming emotional distress and demanding compensation for pain and suffering. I sat in the courtroom, flanked by Mr. Reeves and Patricia. Behind me, Mother Ernestine, Pastor Williams, and a dozen members of my church filled the benches. Their presence gave me strength. My children sat on the other side with their lawyer. They looked different, tired, stressed. DeAndre had lost weight. Tamika's hair wasn't done, and she never went anywhere without her hair done. Shanice's designer clothes were gone, replaced with something off the rack. Turns out living beyond your means catches up with you when the ATM shuts down. Judge Martha Hendricks, a no-nonsense Black woman in her 60s, reviewed the motion with barely concealed irritation. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," she said, looking over her glasses at Brett Cunningham. "Your clients are suing their mother for emotional distress because she refused to continue funding their lifestyle. Your Honor, with respect, Mrs. Washington made a verbal commitment to support her children. A commitment she fulfilled for decades," Judge Hendricks interrupted. According to the financial records submitted by Mr. Reeves, Mrs. Washington gave her children over $800,000 in the past 10 years alone. Money she earned working as a nurse, money she could have used for her own retirement, and now they're claiming distress because she stopped? Your Honor, I'm not finished. Judge Hendricks turned to my children. Stand up, all 3 of you. They stood, looking nervous. I'm a mother, Judge Hendricks said. I'm a grandmother, and I'm ashamed of what I'm seeing here today. Your mother worked her whole life to provide for you. She took in a child who wasn't biologically hers and loved her as her own. She sacrificed her own comfort for your benefit. And how did you repay her? By treating her like a bank. By humiliating her in public. By demanding she give up an inheritance left to her by her best friend. Shanice opened her mouth to speak, but Judge Hendricks held up her hand. I've read the deposition transcripts. I've seen the text messages. I've reviewed the restaurant surveillance footage. Yes, the restaurant provided it. And what I saw disgusted me. You told your own mother to find another table. You mocked her for being broke. You excluded her from family events unless she paid for them. That's not love, that's exploitation. The courtroom was silent. Even Brett Cunningham looked uncomfortable. This motion is denied, Judge Hendricks said. Furthermore, I'm issuing a permanent injunction against the plaintiffs. You are prohibited from contacting Mrs. Washington directly. Any communication must go through her attorney. If you violate this order, you'll be held in contempt. Your Honor, please. Tamika started to cry. I'm not done, Judge Hendricks said, her voice softer now. I'm also ordering that you three undergo mandatory family counseling. Not for your mother's benefit, for yours. Because you need to understand what you've done and why it was wrong. The court will cover the cost. She turned to me. Mrs. Washington, you're free to go. And may I say, I hope you enjoy every penny of that inheritance. You've earned it. As we left the courtroom, my children tried to approach me, but Mr. Reeves and the bailiffs kept them back. I heard Tamika crying, heard DeAndre calling my name, but I didn't look back. Outside, the Memphis sun was shining bright. Mother Ernestine hugged me tight. You did good, baby, she whispered. You did real good. But the story wasn't over yet. That evening, I was in my new home, a beautiful house in Germantown with a garden and a porch swing, when my doorbell rang. Security checked the camera and told me it was a young person. My grandson Caleb stood on my porch. He was 19, in college, and I hadn't seen him since the restaurant incident. I told security to let him in. He walked into my living room looking nervous, holding his phone like a lifeline. Grammy D, he said, and the name made my eyes water. He was the only one who still called me that. I'm sorry to just show up. I know there's like court orders and stuff, but I had to see you. It's okay, baby, I said, gesturing for him to sit. You're not bound by those orders. You didn't do anything wrong. He sat on the edge of the couch, looking at his hands. I'm sorry, for my parents, for all of this. I tried to tell them they were wrong, but they wouldn't listen. They never listen. That's not your burden to carry, I said. Mr. Reeves called me, Caleb said, about the college fund. Grammy, you didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. You're my grandson. I love you. And just because I can't have a relationship with your father right now doesn't mean I can't help you build your future. Caleb started crying then, really crying. They told us you didn't love us anymore, that you chose money over family. But that's not true, is it? No, baby. I chose myself for once. That doesn't mean I stopped loving you. It means I stopped letting people who were hurting me continue to do it. You understand? He nodded. Can I still call you sometimes? Can we still have a relationship? Of course, I said, pulling him into a hug. You call me anytime. You visit anytime. You and all your cousins. My door is always open to you. Over the next few months, something beautiful happened. One by one, my grandchildren reached out. Not all of them, but enough. They came to visit, to talk, to build relationships that weren't based on money or obligation, but on genuine love. My children, on the other hand, stayed away. The counseling Judge Hendricks ordered was apparently eye-opening. Patricia, who kept tabs on everything, told me that the therapist had diagnosed all three of them with entitlement issues and was working on helping them understand healthy boundaries. I didn't know if they'd ever really change. But that wasn't my responsibility anymore. 6 months after that night at the restaurant, I stood in the community center of Greater Hope Baptist Church for a special ceremony. The Loretta Mae Jenkins Foundation for Elder Financial Freedom was officially launching. We'd partnered with legal aid organizations, senior centers, and churches across Tennessee to help seniors recognize and escape financial abuse. Pastor Williams prayed over the foundation. Mother Ernestine cut the ribbon, and I gave a speech to a room full of seniors, many of whom had their own stories of ungrateful children and financial exploitation. I'm not here to tell you to abandon your families, I said. I'm here to tell you that loving yourself isn't selfish, setting boundaries isn't cruel, and sometimes balitzare. The best thing you can do for people who are using you is to stop letting them. The room erupted in applause. After the ceremony, as I stood there shaking hands and hugging people, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around and froze. Shanice stood there. Not the angry, entitled Shanice from the restaurant. She looked smaller somehow, humbler. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying. "Grammy?" she said, and that name, the one she hadn't used in years, almost broke me. "Can we talk? Please?" I looked at Mr. Reeves, who stood nearby with security. He nodded, indicating it was safe. "Outside," I said. We walked to a bench in front of the church, the same bench where I used to sit with Raymond after Sunday service, back when he was alive and my children were small and the world made sense. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Shanice started, her voice shaking. "I don't deserve it. What I did, what we all did, it was wrong. Worse than wrong. It was evil." I didn't interrupt, just let her talk. "The therapy Judge Hendricks ordered, it made me see things I didn't want to see. About myself, about how I treated you. Grammy, you saved my life. You took me in when my mama died, and you loved me like I was your own. And I repaid you by treating you like you were nothing." Tears streamed down her face. "I'm not here to ask for money. I'm not even here to ask for a relationship. I'm just here to say I'm sorry, and to tell you that I'm proud of you. For standing up for yourself. For choosing yourself. You taught me something important, even if it took me this long to learn it." I sat there, looking at this woman who was my daughter in every way that mattered, the little girl I'd rocked to sleep after nightmares. The teenager I'd stayed up with during heartbreak, the young woman I'd helped buy her first car. "Thank you for saying that," I said finally. "I accept your apology." Shanice looked up, surprised. "But accepting your apology doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was," I continued. "You hurt me, baby. Deeply. And healing from that takes time. Maybe we can rebuild something. Slowly. With boundaries. With respect. But it has to be different this time." "I understand," Shanice said, nodding. "Whatever you need, however long it takes. I just want the chance to know you again. The real you. Not the woman we turned into our personal bank." We sat there for a long time, watching the sunset over Memphis. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet. But it was a start. A small crack in the wall I'd built around my heart. That night I sat on my porch swing, wrapped in a blanket, looking at the stars. My phone rang. It was Patricia. "How are you doing?" she asked. "I'm okay," I said, and I meant it. Better than okay, actually. I'm good. "Aunt Loretta would be proud," Patricia said. "You've taken her gift and turned it into something beautiful." "She gave me more than money," I said. "She gave me permission to live, to choose myself, to be free." "That's what she wanted. That's what she always wanted for you." After we hung up, I stayed on the porch for a while longer. I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the pain, the legal battles, the unexpected blessings. I thought about my children. DeAndre still hadn't reached out, and neither had Tamika. Maybe they would someday. Maybe they wouldn't. I was learning to be okay with either outcome. I thought about my grandchildren and the relationships we were building. Real relationships based on love, not money. I thought about Loretta, my friend, my sister, who loved me enough to free me even after death. And I thought about myself, Dolores Washington, 72 years old, nurse, mother, grandmother, friend, and now, for the first time in my life, my own person. The wind chimed through the garden, and somewhere in the distance I heard church bells ringing. The same bells that rang every evening at Greater Hope, calling the faithful home. And I realized I was home, not in a house or a city or even a state, but home in myself, in my own skin, in my own peace. I was finally, truly free. And that freedom, that peace, was worth more than $5 billion. Though I had to admit, having the $5 billion didn't hurt. I laughed then, a real laugh, the kind I hadn't laughed in years. The kind Loretta and I used to share when we were young and the world was full of possibilities. I pulled out my phone and looked at a picture of Loretta and me from 50 years ago. 2 young women with big smiles and bigger dreams. "Thank you, sister," I whispered to the photo. "Thank you for loving me enough to set me free." The stars twinkled above Memphis, and somewhere in that vast universe, I knew Loretta was smiling. My journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more opportunities to grow, more chances to help others find their own freedom. But tonight, on this porch, in this moment, I was exactly where I needed to be. Whole. Free. And finally, after 72 years, truly loved by the person who mattered most. Myself. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.